Welcome to Building Brand Gravity. I'm Ann Green. I'm a principal here at G&S Business Communications, and I'm so excited to have a number of students from the Ohio State University, from an organization named BASCA, and I'm going to ask them to talk about that quite a bit today. But to get started, let me do some intros, because I have to say, you guys are an impressive group. When I was working on your bios, I was like, you had a lot more going on than I did when I was your age. I am in my 50s now, so I can say that. But I'll go just around the screens here. Rikki Lee Joiner, you are a senior at OSU pursuing a degree in business marketing. And Rikki Lee serves as a vice president of the BASCA Executive Board. She's an OSU moral scholar and active with a lot of organizations on campus, Rikki Lee, which is very cool. Lots of internship experience, and you've launched your own digital marketing firm, the Rikki Lee Agency. So welcome. Then we have Michaela Matheney. She's a junior at OSU pursuing a degree in marketing. You've served on the executive board of BASCA and a member of the Undergraduate Society of Black Leaders. In addition to your work experience with organizations like Urban Accelerator X and the Columbus Urban League, you've also launched, you guys are entrepreneurial, a digital marketing agency named Idea Enterprises. And finally, Keilah Thompson is a senior at OSU pursuing a degree in strategic communications. And you're on the BASCA Executive Board as a director of membership experience and also the director of diversity and inclusion for the Ohio State's PRSSA chapter, which is a really important organization in communications. You've launched your own lifestyle brand named Universe Soul Expressions to spread self-healing to young adults. Very cool. And you've done a number of internships as well. So super impressive. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being with me tonight. I appreciate it. So you're welcome. Who wants to jump in and define what is BASCA? Give us the name of the acronym and tell us a little bit about that organization and how it brought you guys together. And I'll let anybody who wants to jump in do so.
I guess I can. BASCA is the Black Advertising Strategic Communication Association. I started getting a part of the organization my freshman year. I was actually approached by the then president, Michaela Davis, who now works for Cricket. But she just let me know about the organization. She saw the work that I was doing with my digital marketing agency and let me know that this was the perfect opportunity for me to connect with other students that were interested in strategic comms and marketing and advertising, and that every week they would have a different working professional within the industry coming to speak to students about their experience and all of the plethora of wonderful opportunities that can be afforded to us, because I think there is a gap generally between, these sort of opportunities and students of colors. And, BASCA, our whole entire mission is to equitize opportunities for students that are minorities looking to enter this space. So yeah, that's pretty much a little bit about BASCA.
I love that. Keilah, how did you get involved with BASCA originally?
Yeah, last year, I think the first semester of last year, I was told by a professor about BASCA. And then I'm like, wow, the Black Advertising Strategic Communication Association. The name just screamed to me. I'm like, this is where I need to be, especially as a StratCom major. And then I went to the first meeting and I just felt so welcome. It's very family oriented, but you are around like-minded peers. So it's like, it's interesting to be around and now be on the e-board and really see how we're all college students, but we know how to turn our professional gear on. And I love seeing each other speak and express ourselves and be entrepreneurial and be business minded, but also be friends with these people.
That's amazing. How about you, Michaela?
Oh man, I think my journey to BASCA is a little bit more interesting. I think I interviewed for an executive board position for BASCA. Rikki and another one of our leaders reached out to me and was like, hey, we think you'd be really great for this position. I've been doing a lot of work with marketing and advertising in the local Columbus area. So they reached out and was like, hey, we think you'd be really great for this position. And ever since, we've been together. We've been doing BASCA.
I love the idea of equitizing opportunity. And just a little shout out that the prior podcast conversation I had the honor of doing was with Dr. Osei Appiah, who is the founder of BASCA. He's a professor in the School of Communications at the Ohio State University, a really renowned scholar on race relative to communication, and lots of interesting research and a lot of passion for this idea of what is opportunity for um, especially Black students, but also diversity in general across marketing communications and the whole industry. And that's the industry I've worked in for almost 30 years. You know, I was a liberal arts person. I wasn't as much on the track as you guys are already. But I'm interested, you know, for your stories, what drew you each to either marketing or business marketing or communications? Each of you is on a journey relative to that. And as we said in your bios, and as you just said, Michaela, like you've already been really like leaning into this even beyond just your studies. Why don't you jump in? You know, what has drawn you to, what do you love about this field that you've started to become so active in it at an age where a lot of people are barely knowing what they want to do with their life, right?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. Growing up in the Deep South and growing up in a really, really small town, the thing that always was so interesting to me was how I would go to bigger cities or visit family and meet people and just understand that these people have so many stories and they exist in areas and pockets and communities that nobody would ever know about. And I tell people all the time, before I was ever a marketer or a strategist or a consultant, I was always a writer. And I always had the drive to tell the stories of people in communities in areas that I felt like really deserved that platform. So I kind of leaned into that a lot. And as I got older, I had a really, really big interest in entrepreneurship. And I was lost because at the time, I don't think entrepreneurship was really a degree or something you could major in. So I fell into business. But then as I went along in my journey, I realized that the combination of business and entrepreneurship and storytelling becomes marketing.
Yeah. Does that resonate for you, Rikki Lee, in terms of where you kind of came into it and that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, lots of very ambitious women. I like to say I come from a matriarchy, like there's so many women in my family. And so just seeing them go after a lot of their dreams and seeing that the sky was never really the limit for me opened my mind. But similar to her, coming from the background that I was in, I was always the only one in the room representing. And so, me coming into the digital marketing space and PR and things of that nature, I always wanted to be able to not only tell our story, but tell it right. Because I can come from a place of empathy and understanding of the reason why we do the things that we do, the reason why we have the style, and we give off the fragrance that we do in a lot of different capacities. And so, I went on a mission trip with a nonprofit that I was actually working with in high school, and I met a young girl, and I was taking a picture of her, and she was like really intrigued by my photography, and she wanted me to show her how to take a picture. And I actually did a whole presentation for this for a business pitch competition. But in that moment, that really solidified for me that this was the line of work and the field that I wanted to work in, because being able to tell our story on our behalf and get it right and be able to impact people and get people to understand why we are the way that we are, I think is the most important. Because oftentimes you go on social media, you see reality TV, and we're depicted in a way that's inauthentic. And so to be able to come into this space and really be able to take up space and do it right feels good. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Keilah, the strategic communications area, what attracted you to that? How did you first learn about it? You know, it's funny. I say that because when I got into communications through an agency that used to be called Burson Marsteller and is now called Burson Conan Wolf way back in the day, I was more of a liberal arts person. Like I said, I really didn't even know what communications was as a field or PR. So what was your entry point there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I share a similar story with Rikki and Michaela, knowing what I want to do at a very young age and just being driven towards it. In high school, I was really involved. Like I was in the National MBA Association, National Honor Society, and then eventually I became class president. And throughout all of my experiences, I realized it's just a commonality of this love for leadership and this desire to influence. And I just became fascinated by this idea. And then I started researching, and I was looking for careers that combined that strategy, that public speaking, that creativity, and public relations just end up coming about. So I will say that I wasn't exposed to it, and that's one of the things that I did want to mention. Like I wasn't outwardly exposed to public relations, and then publicists are behind the scenes, and so Black publicists are even more invisible because, you know, it's already a behind the scenes industry. And so I will say like that it got a little off track, but I will say that that was my journey towards knowing what I wanted to do with public relations. And I'm still struggling with finding like role models in that area, but I'm still like steadfast on the path.
I think you're right on track. I mean, I loved what you were talking about, and I want to ask you all to reflect on something. This question you talked about it's things being invisible, you know, and there are certain aspects of these fields that are more obvious in culture, like advertising has always been more visible just in general. Like if we talk about the field versus public relations is a bit more behind the scenes for a lot of people, but that's not exactly what we're talking about right now. We're talking about what is visible or invisible to specific communities in our society. And what does it mean to you all? And this may go back to that equitizing opportunity that you talked about, Rikki Lee, and what BASCA is trying to do. What does it mean to you all to increase the idea of knowing about something, increasing the idea of seeing something, and also seeing others doing it, that you feel that representation is there? Anyone can jump in on that.
I would like to say that that is my whole brand and life mission. Growing up, and I'm sure we all can share the same sentiments, turning on the television, looking to social media platforms and a variety of different things, you're constantly looking for that one person to be your role model or to be that living blueprint for what it is that you would like to do. And to visualize and idolize being able to occupy a space that someone is currently occupying is amazing. And I think a lot of times there are many things that I thought I wanted to do because I saw someone else do it first. Like, you know, Rachel Ray having a cooking show or Oprah Winfrey having a talk show, and all of these different spaces. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do that because they were brave enough to do it before me. And so that's why it's so important for me to be a part of organizations like BASCA and the Undergraduate Society of Black Leaders, because it is an opportunity for us to not only see people that are taking up space and having a seat at these tables, but also being able to intimately interact with them and ask them the very important questions of like, what is it like in this field? How do you feel about your work? Is it impactful? How does it make you feel about yourself at the end of the day? And when you have those intimate conversations with people, it can really make or break whether or not you actually see yourself occupying that space. And so even before I was a part of BASCA, I always was a very curious individual. And if I was not exposed to something, made sure to go out and seek it out myself, you know, asking questions. And we now have amazing platforms like LinkedIn and things and whatnot, where we're able to reach out to people and ask them questions. But for students who aren't as ambitious or aren't as, not even ambitious, I would say, what is the word, extroverted, and who, you know, aren't as comfortable with reaching out to people, we really want to make sure that we're mitigating any obstacles for you being able to see, you know, the plethora of options that are in the creative space, because the lines are blurring. Like advertising is marketing, marketing is PR, like, and there's so many different roles and titles that are coming about. And it's really important for us to show people what it looks like.
It's so true, Rikki Lee. I so agree with that. Michaela, what's your reaction to that? This idea of seeing, of knowing about something, of creating a space where, even to everything Rikki was talking about, being able to envision it,
Absolutely.
talk.
Absolutely, no. I will say that in the Black community, we talk a lot about this proverb, and the proverb is, you cannot be what you cannot see. So understanding that when you create that representation or you see that representation, you empower other people to become the things that they once couldn't see. And that's super important to me, because when we talk about role models and figures in media and even behind the scenes, it can be super difficult to pull back the curtains on an industry or a career or a role that's already somewhat underground, right? And I relate a lot to Rikki in setting myself up to be the person where there can be another person that comes behind me and sees that, hey, like, Michaela did this. Like, she's a great marketer. She's a great advertiser. She's a great publicist. I can do those things too. some of my role models were like Oprah Winfrey, like seeing her on TV. I took a lot of inspiration from The Real and loving the fact that they cultivated a community of strong Black women, or strong women in general, who were able to take up this space on daytime TV, which is one of the biggest things to just do. So I think it's super important to understand that when you're in BASCA or in organizations like BASCA, you are truly creating pathways that not only are you navigating, but you're creating the pathway to allow other people to follow behind you. But it's also another thing we do in the Black community, like lift as we climb mentality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so
Yeah, I love
important.
that.
Keilah, what's your reaction to this conversation?
Yeah, like as soon as you said that, I was just thinking about the other end of things and how being in this position of trailblazing the visibility of our culture comes with a great deal of accountability and responsibility, because we all know that when it comes to marketing, communications, and public relations, what's always in the air is ethics and transparency. And even more when you are representing a minority, especially the Black minority, you have to be very mindful of what messages you are sharing. What clients are you representing? What companies are you involving yourself in? Because it can be not as a positive influence as you would want it to be. And so that has been at the forefront of my mind when pursuing my career path, like really being mindful of the spaces I'm taking up, and very, very mindful of the messages that I'm sharing that are going to impact my community.
That's so important. And, you're reminding me of a bigger picture question. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on it because you all think so deeply about these things. And by the way, when the BASCA student team came to visit us last fall, I've met with a lot of student groups over the years. They were some of the best questions I've ever gotten from you all. I mean, really savvy. And also I was like, how do you even know about the new business process? I mean, it indicated that you all were paying remarkable attention and already leaning into the work on your own, aside from BASCA, and listening very carefully and making the most of those opportunities. But one of the big picture questions that we see in marketing communications field today is, how is it that companies, corporations, who are made up of people, but they are also entities. It's a strange thing. They're entities in and of themselves, but they're also made up of people. How and when they show their values, how do they speak out on issues in society? How do they balance multiple stakeholders? And how it is that especially younger generations view them and want to hear what their voice is on certain things. So this is a hot topic of conversation. I'm not sure if anybody wants to, share your thoughts on it, but something I know that we're thinking about all the time, both for ourselves and for our clients.
I think that's a super interesting question. I think something that we all understand as marketers, or just in this field in general, is social listening and being able to tap into your audience. And I think with our generation, particularly Gen Z, and the rise of social media, we're so interconnected with so many different types of people and so many different types of communities that it's almost hard to not listen to the noise. And I think sometimes with these entities or with these companies, they're not as engaged with their customers on their platforms. They're not really listening. And sometimes, too, that means you have to go out and actively experience the world for what it is. You have to meet people. You have to talk to people. So I think it ultimately boils down to understanding how to connect. And are you really and honestly, truly connecting with people? Because, again, the root of marketing is about storytelling. So are you connecting with these people enough, intimately enough, deeply enough to understand how to tell their stories?
I think it's also a matter of wanting to have people come alongside you to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And that's not in just a capacity just to get the one-off story, but that's in the capacity of having individuals in the fabric of your company that look like the communities that you're trying to impact, especially in upper, leadership roles and things of that nature, because that can really shape the way in which you speak to people and you speak about people when you have people who aren't tone deaf to what's happening, specifically in a lot of communities. And I think as marketers, as advertisers, publicists, and whatnot, it, like you said, Keilah, there is a lot of responsibility and accountability that has to come with that. And me, I'm always tapping in and like listening to companies, not only what they say, but what they also don't say. And I think that speaks volumes about, your ethics, your morals, and who really cares and how much you really care. And so I think it's not enough to just put together a curated list during Black History Month. It's a matter of having really deep, thoughtful conversations every single day of the year when it comes to what's happening in different communities.
I love that, Rikki. And I just want to piggyback on what you're saying because I'm assisting Dr. Appiah with research on cultural voyeurism, and I'm very excited because I'm having so much like respect and inspiration for Gen Z. I'm Gen Zer, and I love Gen Z because we're reshaping what publicity looks like, especially for those with major influence. I'm saying with major influence because I want to do entertainment publicity, like for actors, artists, musicians, so popular culture. And I'm seeing and I'm relating it back to what I want to do with my career path. And social media is creating this platform that is very candid, very transparent, and really it's unavoidable to have these conversations. And what I'm learning with research on cultural voyeurism, we're gaining perspective. So someone in another race who's not minority can gain perspective on Black people and their experiences through social listening by being a voyeur and looking at conversations that are being had and hearing their perspective. This is very different because, 20, 30 years ago, we weren't able to have these candid conversations and it became taboo when these came up. So I'm really enjoying how social media is shaping the way publicity is going to be in the future.
And you're all speaking to that question of, like you said, Michaela, how connected is an organization really with their stakeholders? How do they understand how to listen? What's authentic about how they're showing how they care? And you are all raising a really important point that we debate a lot here at our agency, which is we want to mark these milestone months, Women's History Month, Black History Month, Pride. But at the same time, we have to hold space for the fact that that is also problematic in its own way, that this has to be 365. So celebrating those moments where we stop and we say, there's a history here that has to be honored, and there's a present that has to be honored. But there's also what's the ongoing action and conversation. And I think that I'm a Gen Xer, so we're different letters with one generation between us. But it's really heartening to hear how you're all thinking about this. And these are complicated questions, to hear the nuance with which you engage with them. You've met a lot of folks on these BASCA trips and through your own work, right? You've met a lot of different marketers and executives. You've been what we would call client side and agencies, and you've met them all. And when you go to these tours and meet different folks, and Rikki Lee, you kind of talked about this a little bit, which is like trying to probe to say, what is it really like for you? What's really this role like? But what are some of the things that you try to find out? And how has it been helpful for you to have this sort of vehicle, not just in your own internships and work, but also something like BASCA where you're going on these deliberate trips? How is that helpful to your process in assessing what you want to do and where you want to be in the world? I don't know, maybe Keilah, I'll pick on you again and see what you think about that.
Oh, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's just as you go out and meet all these different executives and people at different companies, like, how is that important for you? How is that helpful to you versus just the kind of internships you may have locally?
Yeah, I really would say it expands my worldview and the opportunities for me, especially with me pursuing entertainment publicity, is very limited in Columbus, Ohio. And so being able to go to New York was amazing for me. And being able to visit different media and music labels, that was mind blowing. And it showed me where I could really be because I thought I was going to have to pursue my career and be an agency until I was ready to create my own agency. But now I know, I can be in-house somewhere. I can do something else. So I will say it's just expanding my worldview. Another thing has been really learning about company culture and learning how important that is because, you can go to the flashiest place and the flashiest company, but it might not be the best fit for you culture-wise.
That's really important. Any thoughts from you, Michaela, on that and that power of sort of seeing people getting out in the world and meeting more people that way?
Yeah, it definitely resonated with me when Keilah mentioned company culture. And I think, like she mentioned before, the beautiful thing about Gen Z is that we are not afraid of having the hard conversations, and we're not afraid about asking, what are your views and perspectives on things that are important to me and my culture? Or how do you handle when particular things happen in the workplace? Or are you aware of your own biases or the way that you may microaggress towards other people, or just things of that nature? So when we're able to talk to these, upper management, executives, the managers, things like that, it's so important to get that face time with them to ask them those questions, because I think we live in a world where, especially when you're working agent side, where things can be super tailored, or in general when you're on a job interview, they have time to think about things and tailor them to sound a particular way. But when you're sitting with them face to face at a table and you're asking, they don't have time to think as much. They have to be honest. Not they have to be honest, but you're more likely to get an honest answer when you're having that FaceTime with them. So just being able to get the real raw perspective of what the industry is like and what the company is like is more than monumental to what my journey looks like, especially starting my own marketing agency. So
That's really insightful. Rikki Lee, is there anything you want to build on that? What are you thinking about as you hear this?
Yes, so I have a hot take.
Okay, please.
Many of my peers in Bosco, we had a very intimate conversation about how we felt after all of our tours. And I would just like to give GNS some really big praises, because when I tell you, we traveled to, I think, 7 different companies over the course of 2 days, and your company was the only company that everyone was present to speak with us and speak about their experiences within the company. And it just felt as though you all really cared and you were invested in not only our future, but also invested in understanding where we're coming from and the spaces we want to occupy. And I think that speaks volumes about where you all are in DEI, and that it's not just performative, like it's serious and you're really trying to make impact and move the needle forward for students, and specifically minority students. But going to the other companies, it was kind of like, the face of the race that was there to speak on their behalf and tell us a little bit about, I think, are they called ECGs, the employee groups that they have within the corporations, and how they meet monthly, and that's how they're able to provide community. And I think in a lot of ways, someone could easily tap into BASCA and try to get us to speak about on behalf of, like, what is it like going to a PWI. But that's like a very um, pivotal and like very hard task to do, because you can't speak on company culture as this very siloed individual or a siloed group, a part of a very larger infrastructure. And so that meant a lot to me to see everyone there and present. And I think for companies that are trying to move the needle forward in partaking in those sort of conversations, I think it's important to have a multitude of different perspectives at the table to really speak on behalf of not only how do you feel as a member of this minority group, but how do you feel as someone who's not a part of the minority group, and how do you want to contribute to creating or fostering a space where everyone feels welcome. So that meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Wow, I appreciate that so much. I mean, we have all of our own challenges and problems, and we're, on the journey, but it's meaningful that that was the experience you had. And for our listeners who weren't in the room, which is everybody, when you all visited, we had a lot of folks there from our New York office of all levels, including entry level all the way up to myself as a principal. And there were probably about 7 or 8 team members from GNS there, because they, love meeting with students. And it's really a fun and rewarding thing for our younger staff too. Like they want to, they have so much to share. And frankly, they're closer in age and potential experience, Um, and they're really smart, and just put them on the stage and let them go. And you felt that, that's, I think, what you felt was just the authentic selves that were there sharing what they're passionate about. And that's why I think it was an exciting exchange in the room, because all of you brought that too, which is wonderful. As you talked earlier, Rikki Lee, about moments when you've been the only one in the room, and that's a common refrain. For me, I am, again, for our listeners, a white woman in my early 50s. When I started in my career, I've experienced a lot of what is the classic sexism that one might experience, especially sometimes centered in whiteness, but much, much broader than that, as we know, in our culture, and very intersectional. Although I come from a lot of privilege, and I own that very openly. But I knew a little bit of what that was like, and I've watched some big changes in our industry, and I've grown as a leader. And I knew the women who trailblazed in front of me, almost all of them white also, by the way, because of our industry has that history. But when you think about getting beyond that only person in the room and building more of that talent and seeing more of yourselves, what are the things that you as young Black professionals are nervous about the things that you're concerned about as you hope to enter this field? Like, let's talk about the things you're worried about, and then we can talk about the things you're excited about. But what are some things that concern you? Keilah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that being the only face of representation and always being the advocate it can be very exhausting. And I know I'm concerned because I know eventually I will be in those spaces where I am the only Black woman or the only minority. And when you're not a minority, you don't have to think about certain things like how certain language could be offensive. And I would just say I would love if people who didn't identify as a minority would be more on the pulse of race relations so that they could better be of assistance when it comes to the responsibility of creating inclusive spaces.
Absolutely. I've thought about this so much. And I think as Black women, or just minorities in general, this is something that we experience. So you imagine a crowd full of people, and someone is on a stage and they're saying things that you don't agree with, and you're the only person that stands up. And you're like, no, I don't think that's right. And then you look around and nobody else is co-signing you. No one else is standing up for you, being in this field as a Black woman can be very lonely. And something that I touch on a lot is imposter syndrome. When you look around the room and you don't see anyone else that looks like you, and the people ahead of you don't look anything like you or share the same experiences as you. So in light of being the only one, sometimes you wonder if you really belong in that space. That's one of my biggest fears and one of my biggest challenges as an entrepreneur in this space, is understanding that just because I feel as if I am the only one in a particular space does not necessarily mean that I don't belong. So
that's pretty profound. Rikki Lee, what would you say?
I would say I don't actually have too many worries. I think
Good.
Worry for myself is just the longevity within the industry, just because I'm already burnt out and I'm only planning to be here for 2 years. And I mean, I'm beyond the execution phase. I think I've moved up the ladder and I'm like, okay, I want to do strategy. But I think the future is bright. Just because there are so many young women who are on fire for creating inclusive spaces and thinking outside of the box and really giving immersive experiences for the culture, and I think that gives me a lot of pride and a lot of joy because it once didn't look like that before. So I'm actually very optimistic for the future because my motto is always take up space, but not only take up space, but also make room for other people that look like you to be able to, have a seat at the table and add, perspective.
Yeah, we talked in some of the trainings we do here, there's the idea of calling people out, but we also talk about calling people in. How do you invite people into that conversation? But I'd love to build on what is encouraging. When I talked to Dr. Appiah, so Dr. Osei Appiah, who is the founder, as we mentioned before, of BASCA and a professor of communication at The Ohio State University, when he and I ended our podcast conversation, he talked about actually being also encouraged. And from him, he was looking at it in terms of intergroup relationships, part of his research, And he talked about how he's seeing just so much diversity and intersectionality among younger people, and so many different friend groups and different kinds of levels of acceptance. And as I think Michaela, actually I forget which one of you, because all of you have been talking about it, said earlier, the diversity within social media. I think Keilah, you were talking about that voyeurism, to be able to see, groups that you may not be a part of, but you can participate in them from the outside in a way and become familiar. So Rikki Lee talked about a couple of things she's excited about. Keilah, what are the things that excite you about embarking on this career?
Like I said, going back to Gen Z, I'm literally a Gen Z cheerleader. I'm really excited for social media and these new media landscapes. And, public relations is all about the media landscape, and our industry evolves with the media landscape. And with social media becoming very transformational in how people communicate and how they engage with each other, I am excited to see how that changes the way people interact, the way they view, the way they empathize. I'm really excited on more empathy building going on and really putting yourself in another person's shoes. I'm also excited for like the human connection aspect improving. I feel like, especially in America, we can be very disconnected from each other, from each other's perspectives, lifestyles, from each other's challenges. And social media, it's that gateway to building human connection. And for me, that is what publicity and public relations and being a professional in public relations is really about. Human connection. It's all about human connection, because without that human connection, it's a facade. And honestly, I want PR to be very real. And I think social media is creating it to be something realer than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Michaela, what are your thoughts on this? What excites you about either the field or how you're engaging with it?
I just want to say, Keilah, that was a beautiful answer. That was beautiful. So for the record, one of the things that I'm really interested in is philanthropy. And part of philanthropy is advocating for human welfare. And in this field, you realize when you're hearing these stories or when you're exploring these things that it will actually give you so much hope for people and humanity and just the way that things go. Because sometimes the world is really dark. We see horrible things on social media, horrible things publicized. But then as you go along, you see these very beautiful things, these very inspiring things that almost motivates you outside of the screen or in your own day-to-day life, I think I'm just super excited to see how, with the transformation of social media, how people will empathize with people, like Keilah mentioned. Just because being able to have access to people to hear those beautiful stories as much as the bad ones, it's the power of one. You tell one good story to one good person, and they will go out and tell it to someone else, and that will carry on. So,
it's funny. There's a good friend of mine from high school way back in the 80s, and she's an environmental scientist who works at a university up in Montreal. And I remember catching up with her. I hadn't seen her in years, and we were talking about her research, and she was talking about the crushing amount of negative stories about climate change and how it's so disempowering and overwhelming. She was working on a project with researchers around the world to collect stories of local communities becoming more sustainable on their own, making small but critical changes locally in order to sustain in the future and to fight climate change on a micro level. And it's very much what you were saying, Michaela, that power of the sense of we're seeing the story, and that tells us that we can do something in the face of something that feels intractable. That feels like very aligned with the conversation we're having today in some ways,
Yeah.
I have to say, as someone who sort of watched the advent of social media, I was in the business world. My agency at the time, my prior agency, launched some of the first corporate blogs, which was hilarious to think about now. But I love hearing encouragement about social media because, I can get really cynical about it. We can look at some of the things like the impacts of algorithms and some of the criticisms of the tech sector. So it makes me excited to sort of hear all of your perspective about the positive power of it and sort of how you're looking at it as a lot of different kinds of potential. As we wrap up today, I'm an organizational leader. There's a lot of folks that you meet through BASCA and other places who are leading organizations. As you said, as leadership changes, hopefully more and more people in those leadership roles will represent more and more of the population, right? But for the leaders that exist now in these fields, in agencies, in companies, leading marketing, leading communications, what are some of the advice that you give them to really cultivate and empower young, talented Black professionals and those from other historically marginalized communities? What kind of advice do you want them to really take away as they think about their workforce? I don't know, Rikki Lee, I'll put you on the spot. What do you think?
I would
It's a big
say
question.
just continue taking up space and be willing to be unapologetically you. I think the best piece of advice I got this past summer during my internship was that bringing all of you to the table is the best thing that you can ever do, because every experience is experience. And the world needs more of you. We've got a lot of everything else. And I think with social media and just with human nature, we like to have commonalities. We like to be able to assimilate into groups and sort of in hopes of feeling like we've got home or something like that. But there's something powerful about individuality and bringing your own experiences to the forefront, because that can shape or reshape the way in which things are currently done. And I think if we want as bright of a future that all of us are kind of depicting now, and like everything that we're enthusiastic about, we have to continue staying on pulse with not only the culture, but with the way in which things make us feel. Pay attention to the things that you love, because there's ways in which you can emulate that and bring that from this space and take it into that one. And I think that's really what's beautiful about some of the best leaders in the world, is their willingness to be daring, their willingness to be bold, and just continue to do things the way that they know feels right, even when the world says it's wrong.
Yeah, I think that's for the leaders out there, how is it that you really allow your staff to bring themselves to work in that way and embrace that? Michaela, what's your take or your advice for leaders out there that may be listening to this?
One of the things I always think about is being proactive and not performative. So, like Rikki mentioned, there is such a beauty in bringing all of yourself and your truth and your authenticity to work with you. Because when you're in upper management, you almost set the tone for everybody else beneath you. And there is such a responsibility, not even just to cultivate and respect that company culture, but to also be sure that the ways that you are contributing to it is impactful for everyone in your organization. So when you are willing to check in on that one person, or you're willing to have that one tough conversation or ask the daring questions, it empowers the people around you to think deeper on themselves and the ways that they interact with people in the company around you. I feel that a lot of people don't understand how great that can be to such a collective of people. Because when you're truly and honestly doing the work of marketing and you're trying to tell the stories of other people, sometimes the first story that people don't understand is themselves. And when you can't tell your own story or be your own biggest advocate, it can be incredibly difficult to take on that role and responsibility for an entirely different group of people.
Yeah, and being vulnerable as a leader is hard for a lot of people, but it really is, to me, a critical part of what a leader can do. And it's not, I don't know, I don't even like the word weak, because I think it's very gendered in a weird way. I really feel being vulnerable is being very, very strong, actually, and being very open. But Keilah, what would be advice you would give, or things that are on your mind for organizations to keep in mind?
Yeah, I would definitely piggyback on what you said and just contain it in 2 words: be human. And I also want to say, instead of assuming we should look up as, entry level workers, meet us halfway and really find value in our insights, because we are the people spending hours on social media. We are the people consuming all this media. So we know how things are changing, and we know the direction it's going in. We know what's going to work, and we know what's going to flop. And so I would say to any of the leaders, welcoming young professionals, especially young Black professionals, find value in us and meet us halfway.
That's awesome. So as we wrap up today, maybe Rikki Lee, I'll end with you because I began with you. Give your pitch for future Ohio State University students to join BASCA. Why should they get involved and support this organization?
Yeah. For anyone that's listening, I would say that BASCA is home. I feel like as a student on a campus with over 60,000 students, it's amazing to be able to rest and be assured that I have not only just my e-board members, but actual members of the organization that I can phone and have intimate conversations and, just feel loved with. Not only that, but you're able to call them friends and go out and acquire amazing internship opportunities, go on professional development trips and meet amazing professionals and have intimate conversations with them about what is it really like to work at places like Showtime and Spotify and Warner Music and ABC and Good Morning America. Like, that's just to name a few. And furthermore, I feel like it's very important to stay on pulse with, professional development. And we provide a lot of workshops and resources for students to stay on pulse with what the industry is requiring of students. And so you can come and you can make friends, you can network, eat good food, and you have the potential to make lifelong friends and potential even business partners.
That's amazing. Anything that Rikki Lee missed, Michaela or Keilah?
I think that's pretty solid. I mean, we're a family at BASCA. Like Rikki said, we're family. We actually talk to each other. We're not just some student organization that you join and, you come to the meetings and then you leave and then you never see each other again. Like now at BASCA, we have game nights, we have food together, we go out together. BASCA is really about being able to build that community with other people that look like you and have the same interests. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make a way.
That's right.
So we should go together.
That's right. That's right. Well, Rikki Lee Joiner, Michaela Matheney, and Keilah Thompson, you guys are amazing, super inspiring. Really, really an honor to convene this group and have a conversation tonight. And I'm excited to share this with others. So thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.